Your car's engine is a precision machine. Thousands of tiny explosions happening every minute, metal parts moving at incredible speeds, all relying on one critical element: clean fuel. But what happens when that fuel isn't clean? What happens when the gas station you trust is slowly destroying your engine from the inside out? I've been working on engines for over 2 decades, and I've seen it happen more times than I care to count. Perfectly good cars ruined by contaminated fuel. Engines that should have lasted 300,000 miles, dead at 80,000. And the worst part? Most drivers never see it coming until it's too late. The fuel industry has a dirty secret that nobody wants to talk about. Not all gas stations are created equal. Some cut corners, some have outdated equipment, some don't maintain their underground tanks properly, and a few, well, they're deliberately selling you fuel that will wreck your engine. Today, I'm going to reveal 11 gas station chains you should absolutely avoid if you care about your vehicle. These aren't random mom and pop stations. These are recognizable names, places you've probably filled up at. But by the time we're done here, you'll know exactly why you need to stay away from them and what specific damage they're causing to vehicles just like yours every single day. Before we dive into this list, I need to know something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or state in the comments below, because some of these stations might be in your area and you need to know about them. And if this information helps you avoid a costly repair, do me a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, because I share this kind of insider knowledge every week. The automotive industry doesn't want you to know this stuff, but you deserve to protect your investment. Now, let's talk about these 11 stations that are putting your engine at risk. The first chain on our list operates primarily in the southeastern United States, and they've built their business model on one thing: cheap prices. You've probably seen their signs advertising fuel that's 10 to 15 cents cheaper than everyone else. Sounds great, right? Here's what they don't advertise. Their fuel comes from the absolute bottom of the barrel, literally. They purchase rejected fuel batches that major refineries won't sell to premium stations. This fuel often contains higher levels of sulfur, excessive aromatic compounds, and inconsistent octane ratings. When you pump this into your engine, several things start happening immediately. The fuel injectors begin accumulating deposits because the detergent additive package is either minimal or non-existent. These deposits restrict fuel flow, causing incomplete combustion. Your engine computer tries to compensate by adjusting the air-fuel mixture, but it can't fully correct for contaminated fuel. Over time, you'll notice decreased fuel economy, rough idling, and hesitation during acceleration. But the real damage is happening where you can't see it. Inside your combustion chamber, carbon deposits are building up on your intake valves, piston tops, and cylinder walls. This carbon buildup increases compression ratio unpredictably, leading to engine knock and pre-ignition. In modern engines with direct injection, this problem becomes severe because there's no fuel washing over the intake valves to clean them. The intake valves in a direct injection engine rely on oil vapors from the PCV system and whatever minimal cleaning occurs from intake air alone. When you add low-quality fuel with minimal detergents into this equation, you're accelerating deposit formation exponentially. I've pulled apart engines that exclusively used fuel from this chain, and the carbon buildup was so severe it looked like someone poured tar inside. The intake valves had deposits over a 1/4 inch thick, completely changing their profile and dramatically reducing airflow. The piston tops were coated with hard, crusty carbon that created hot spots leading to pre-ignition and detonation. The repair: complete engine teardown, professional walnut shell blasting of the intake valves, chemical cleaning of the combustion chambers, new fuel injectors, and hoping the valves aren't permanently damaged or burned. We're talking $3,000 to $5,000 in repairs because someone wanted to save $5 on a tank of gas. And here's something most people don't realize. Your vehicle warranty won't cover this type of damage because manufacturers consider it maintenance-related and directly tied to fuel quality choices. The second chain you need to avoid operates mainly in the Midwest and parts of the South. Their problem isn't the fuel quality from the refinery, it's what happens to that fuel before it reaches your tank. This chain has a a documented history of inadequate tank maintenance. Underground fuel storage tanks are supposed to be inspected regularly, cleaned periodically, and replaced when they reach a certain age. Steel tanks typically last 20 to 30 years before corrosion becomes a serious issue. Fiberglass tanks last longer, but still require maintenance. This company has repeatedly failed inspections for corroded tanks, sediment buildup, and in some cases, water contamination. Here's why that matters to your engine. When water gets into fuel, it doesn't mix. It sits at the bottom of the tank because water is denser than gasoline. Every time someone fills up and the fuel level drops, that water has a chance to get sucked into the pump system. Even small amounts of water in gasoline can cause immediate problems. Water doesn't compress like fuel does. When it enters your combustion chamber, it can cause hydrolock, potentially bending connecting rods or cracking pistons. But even if you don't get catastrophic failure, water causes corrosion throughout your fuel system. Your fuel pump, designed to move gasoline, struggles with water and can burn out prematurely. The fuel pump motor relies on gasoline for cooling and lubrication. Water doesn't provide these properties, leading to overheating and premature wear. The ethanol in modern gasoline attracts and holds water, making this problem worse. Ethanol is hygroscopic, meaning it pulls moisture from the air. When fuel sits in poorly sealed tanks, the ethanol absorbs environmental moisture, and this water-saturated ethanol eventually separates from the gasoline in a process called phase separation. This creates a distinct layer at the tank bottom that's mostly water and ethanol with very little gasoline. When this mixture enters your engine, it won't burn properly, causing severe misfires and potential catalyst damage from unburned fuel. I've diagnosed countless fuel system failures that traced back to water contamination from poorly maintained station tanks. The symptoms start subtle: hard starting, especially in cold weather when water can freeze in fuel lines, rough running that seems to come and go, fuel pump noise that sounds like a high-pitched whine, and eventually a check engine light with fuel trim codes showing the computer can't maintain proper air-fuel ratios. By the time you notice the problem, the damage is already spreading through your fuel system. Corrosion is forming in fuel lines, the fuel pump housing is rusting internally, and fuel injectors are starting to stick from corrosion on their pitot valves. And here's the kicker: your car insurance won't cover this type of damage because it's considered maintenance-related, and the gas station will deny responsibility, claiming the water must have come from somewhere else. Moving to our third problematic chain, this one operates coast to coast, which makes them particularly dangerous because of their reach. They've been cited multiple times for octane fraud. Let me explain what this means and why it's destroying engines across the country. Every fuel pump displays an octane rating, usually 87 for regular, 89 for mid-grade, and 91 or 93 for premium. Your engine is designed to run on a specific octane rating. Higher performance engines require premium fuel because of their higher compression ratios. When you select premium at this chain's stations, you're paying premium prices, but independent testing has repeatedly shown their premium fuel testing closer to mid-grade octane levels, sometimes as low as 89 or 90 octane when it should be 93. Why does this matter? Octane rating measures fuel's resistance to pre-ignition and knocking. It's not a measure of fuel quality or energy content. It's specifically about when the fuel ignites under compression. When you put lower octane fuel in an engine designed for premium, the fuel ignites too early in the compression cycle before the spark plug fires. This creates shock waves inside the cylinder that sound like marbles rattling around in your engine. These shock waves create tremendous pressure spikes that stress every component in the combustion chamber. Modern engines have knock sensors that detect this and retard ignition timing to protect the engine, but this comes at a cost. Your engine loses power because combustion is occurring at a less efficient point in the piston stroke. Fuel economy drops because the engine computer is sacrificing efficiency to prevent damage, and you're creating excessive heat in the combustion chamber because the combustion event is lasting longer and occurring at the wrong time. This heat accelerates wear on piston rings, cylinder walls, and valves. The piston rings, which seal combustion pressure and control oil consumption, are designed to operate within specific temperature ranges. Excessive heat causes the rings to lose tension, leading to blowby where combustion gases escape past the rings into the crankcase. This contaminates your engine oil with fuel and combustion byproducts, accelerating wear throughout the engine. Over extended periods, running the wrong octane fuel can cause piston damage, including cracked ringlands where the piston rings sit, burned exhaust valves that can no longer seal properly, and eventually complete engine failure requiring replacement or comprehensive rebuilding. Luxury car owners and performance vehicle enthusiasts are hit hardest by this scam because their engines absolutely require premium fuel to operate safely. They're paying an extra 20 to 30 cents per gallon thinking they're protecting their expensive engines, but they're actually causing incremental damage with every tank. The only way to know for sure is to use an octane testing kit, which most consumers don't have access to. This chain counts on that ignorance and continues profiting from selling mislabeled fuel. Have you ever wondered why your engine runs great for a few tanks and then suddenly starts having issues? Drop a comment and let me know if you've experienced inconsistent engine performance. It might not be your car at all, it might be where you're buying fuel. These patterns often reveal fuel quality problems that dealerships and independent mechanics struggle to diagnose because they're intermittent and tied to where you last filled up. Our fourth chain on the warning list has a different problem entirely, and it's one that affects diesel truck owners particularly hard. This company has multiple locations that have been caught blending heating oil with diesel fuel. If you're not familiar with fuel regulations, heating oil and diesel fuel are chemically similar but legally very different. Heating oil is dyed red and sold without road taxes, making it significantly cheaper than pump diesel. It's intended only for home heating systems, not vehicle engines. The reason is simple. Heating oil contains much higher sulfur content than road diesel. Modern diesel engines use ultra-low sulfur diesel, containing less than 15 parts per million of sulfur. This ultra-low sulfur requirement came into effect in 2007 specifically to enable modern emissions control technology. Heating oil can contain 3,000 parts per million or more, which is 200 times the legal limit for road diesel. When you put high sulfur fuel in a modern diesel engine, you're poisoning the emissions system. The diesel particulate filter, which captures soot particles from the exhaust, becomes contaminated with sulfur compounds that prevent it from regenerating properly. Normally, the DPF heats up periodically to burn off trapped soot, but sulfur contamination interferes with this process, causing the filter to clog permanently. A replacement DPF costs $1,500 to $3,000 depending on the vehicle. The selective catalytic reduction system, which uses diesel exhaust fluid to convert nitrogen oxides into harmless nitrogen and water, becomes poisoned by sulfur. The catalyst inside the SCR unit is permanently damaged by sulfur exposure, requiring replacement at a cost of $2,000 to $5,000. Diesel oxidation catalysts, which are the first stage of emissions control, also become contaminated and fail. We're talking about emission system components that together can cost $10,000 to $20,000 to replace on modern diesel trucks. But it gets worse. The high sulfur content accelerates wear in the fuel injection system. Modern common rail diesel injectors operate at pressures exceeding 30,000 psi and are manufactured to incredibly tight tolerances measured in microns. They require the lubrication properties and cleanliness of ultra-low sulfur diesel to function properly. High sulfur fuel increases wear on injector nozzles, causes internal component failure in the high-pressure pump, and can destroy the entire injection system. I've seen diesel trucks with less than 60,000 miles needing complete fuel system overhauls costing $30,000 to $40,000 because owners unknowingly purchased contaminated diesel from these stations. The repair bills exceed the value of many vehicles, essentially totaling them from fuel contamination alone. And proving the fuel was contaminated after the fact is nearly impossible because it's burned through your system. The red dye in heating oil does show up in fuel filters and can be tested for, but by the time you discover the problem, extensive damage has already occurred. Some of these stations were caught because state inspectors do random fuel quality testing, but many locations have never been checked. If you drive a diesel, this should terrify you because a single tank of contaminated fuel can cause damage that ends your truck's tank's useful life. The fifth chain we're discussing today has grown rapidly through aggressive expansion, opening hundreds of locations in just a few years. Rapid growth sounds good for business, but it's been a disaster for fuel quality control. This company sources fuel from whatever refinery offers the lowest price at any given moment. Unlike major brands that maintain consistent additive packages and quality standards across all their stations through contracts with specific refineries, this chain has no standardization. One location might have decent fuel this week and terrible fuel next week depending on which supplier was cheapest when they needed a delivery. This inconsistency wreaks havoc on modern engine management systems. Your engine computer constantly learns and adapts to the fuel you're using. It monitors oxygen sensors to measure combustion efficiency, adjusts fuel trims to maintain stoichiometric air-fuel ratios, and optimizes ignition timing and valve timing based on consistent fuel quality. These learned parameters are stored in the computer's memory and updated continuously. When fuel quality varies wildly from tank to tank, your engine computer can't maintain optimal calibration. It's constantly relearning and readjusting, never achieving stable operation. You'll experience varying fuel economy where one tank gives you great mileage and the next tank is terrible with no change in driving habits. Performance becomes inconsistent with some tanks providing good acceleration and others feeling sluggish. Eventually, the check engine light illuminates with fuel system codes indicating the computer has detected problems it can't compensate for. Common codes include lean or rich fuel trim codes, oxygen sensor codes, and catalyst efficiency codes. Beyond the computer confusion, inconsistent fuel means inconsistent detergent additives. One tank might have decent cleaning agents that start removing deposits, the next tank might have none allowing deposits to form again. This creates a cycle of deposit formation and partial cleaning that's actually worse than consistent, low-quality fuel. Deposits form in critical areas like fuel injector tips and intake valve stems, get partially cleaned when better fuel arrives, then reform in different patterns when poor fuel returns. This uneven deposit formation can cause hot spots in the combustion chamber, leading to pre-ignition and engine damage. The deposits don't build uniformly, creating unpredictable combustion characteristics that stress engine components. I've tested fuel samples from 5 different locations of this chain in the same city, all on the same day. The octane varied by up to 3 points from 86 to 89 when all were labeled as 87 regular. Detergent additive concentration ranged from adequate to nearly zero based on chemical analysis, and one sample showed signs of contamination with a completely different fuel grade, suggesting tank cross-contamination from delivery errors. This kind of quality control failure should never happen at a professional fuel retailer, yet it's standard practice here because they prioritize cost savings over consistency. Chain number 6 on our list has a unique problem that's particularly insidious: biological contamination in their tanks. This affects both gasoline and diesel, but it's especially problematic in diesel fuel. Here's what's happening. Modern fuel contains ethanol in gasoline and biodiesel in diesel fuel. These biofuels are hygroscopic, meaning they attract and absorb water from the atmosphere. When water accumulates in fuel tanks, especially in warm, humid climates, bacteria and fungi can grow at the interface between the fuel and water. This creates a slimy biomass that looks like brown or black mucus. The microorganisms feed on the hydrocarbons in fuel and thrive in the water layer, reproducing rapidly under the right conditions. This chain has been repeatedly cited for failing to treat their tanks with biocide additives that prevent this growth. They also fail to regularly drain water from their underground tanks, a basic maintenance task that should be performed weekly or monthly depending on conditions. The result is fuel contaminated with microbial growth and the acidic waste products these organisms produce. When this fuel enters your vehicle, several things happen rapidly. Your fuel filter clogs, sometimes within just a few hundred miles, because it's capturing the biomass and the particles it generates. The filter becomes packed with a brown, slimy substance that restricts fuel flow. As fuel flow decreases, your engine experiences fuel starvation symptoms, loss of power, hesitation, and eventually stalling. The microorganisms themselves and their acidic waste products corrode fuel system components, especially the rubber hoses and seals that are vulnerable to chemical attack. The acids eat away at rubber compounds, causing hoses to become brittle and crack, and seals to lose their flexibility and leak. In diesel engines, this contamination can destroy expensive injection pumps and injectors within weeks of exposure. The biological growth creates particles that score precision surfaces in the injection system, and the acids corrode metal components. Even in gasoline engines, the acidic compounds attack fuel system components including the fuel pump, fuel pressure regulator, and injector seals, leading to leaks and failures. The symptoms often appear suddenly after a fill-up: sudden loss of power as the fuel filter clogs, rough running from inconsistent fuel delivery, fuel system leaks developing as seals fail, and strong fuel odors as vapors escape from deteriorated hoses. By the time you notice the problem, the contamination has spread throughout your entire fuel system because the fuel has circulated through all the components. The fix requires draining and cleaning the fuel tank, which involves removing it from the vehicle and physically scrubbing the interior, replacing the fuel filter multiple times as you flush the system, and potentially replacing corroded fuel lines, damaged seals, and failed components. I've seen repair bills exceed $8,000 for severe cases of biological fuel contamination, particularly in diesel trucks where the injection system alone can cost $5,000 to $7,000 to replace. And here's the worst part. It can happen from a single fill-up if the contamination in the station's tank is severe enough. You could have a perfectly functioning fuel system, fill up once at this chain, and within days be facing thousands in repairs. Are you starting to see a pattern here with these chains? The common thread is choosing profit over quality control. Let me know in the comments if any of these stations are in your area so other viewers can be warned. Your experience could save someone else from expensive repairs and help build a database of problem locations. The seventh chain operates primarily in rural areas and smaller towns where competition is limited. They've built a business model around being the only option for miles, which means they have no incentive to maintain quality standards. Multiple locations have been found selling gasoline that's been sitting in their underground tanks for months, sometimes over a year. Gasoline has a shelf life that most people don't know about. The light hydrocarbons that make up gasoline evaporate over time, even in sealed underground tanks. Underground tanks aren't perfectly sealed. They have vents to prevent pressure buildup as fuel expands and contracts with temperature changes. Through these vents, the most volatile components of gasoline slowly escape. The fuel oxidizes as it reacts with oxygen that enters through vents and dissolved in the fuel itself. Gums form as hydrocarbons polymerize and combine into heavier molecules. The overall energy content decreases as the fuel degrades chemically. Fresh gasoline contains volatile compounds like butane and pentane that vaporize easily at normal temperatures, ensuring proper atomization when injected into the engine. These light fractions are critical for cold starting and proper combustion. Old gasoline loses these volatile components, becoming heavier and less combustible. The remaining fuel has difficulty vaporizing, especially in cold weather, making it hard to create the proper air-fuel mixture for combustion. When you fill your tank with old gasoline, you're putting degraded fuel into an engine designed for fresh fuel with specific volatility characteristics. The engine computer can't compensate for fuel that's chemically changed from its design parameters. You'll experience hard starting, especially in cold weather, because the fuel doesn't vaporize properly to create a combustible mixture. The starter has to crank longer, draining your battery and wearing the starter motor. Acceleration will be sluggish because the energy content per gallon is reduced, giving you less power from the same amount of fuel. Fuel economy drops significantly, sometimes by 15 to 20%, because you need to burn more fuel to produce the same power. But the real damage comes from the gums and varnishes that old fuel creates. These compounds coat your fuel injectors, restricting the spray pattern and reducing flow. They build up on intake valves, changing their sealing surfaces and reducing reducing airflow. They deposit in the combustion chamber, creating hot spots and increasing compression unpredictably. Unlike simple carbon deposits that are relatively soft and can sometimes be cleaned with chemicals, these varnish deposits are extremely difficult to remove. They're sticky like syrup when warm and hard like plastic when cool. They trap carbon particles and other combustion byproducts, building up layer after layer until fuel flow is seriously restricted. I've seen fuel injectors completely blocked by varnish from old gasoline, with spray patterns reduced to a dribble instead of a fine mist. These injectors require complete replacement because no amount of cleaning can restore them. The intake manifolds of direct injection engines become coated with a brown, sticky residue that chokes off airflow to the cylinders. This isn't something fuel system cleaner from a bottle can fix. It requires professional disassembly and cleaning or complete component replacement. How can you tell if a station is selling old fuel? Look for stations with very low traffic volume, especially in rural areas. If you rarely see other customers there when you visit, that fuel has been sitting potentially for months. Also, watch for stations that never seem to get fuel deliveries. Fresh fuel comes from tanker trucks regularly at busy stations. If a station goes weeks without deliveries, that's a red flag. Check the condition of the station itself. If it looks poorly maintained on the outside, the underground tanks are probably in similar condition. Trust your instincts and drive a few extra miles to a busier station with fresh fuel. Chain number 8 has grown through purchasing bankrupt or struggling stations, and they've cut costs by deferring maintenance to dangerous levels. Their underground fuel infrastructure is literally falling apart, and that's contaminating fuel with rust, scale, and debris. Modern fuel injection systems operate at incredibly high pressures and tight tolerances that require absolutely clean fuel. Gasoline direct injection systems run at 2,000 to 3,000 psi. Diesel common rail systems exceed 30,000 psi, with some newer systems approaching 40,000 psi. At these pressures, the clearances between moving parts in injectors and pumps are measured in microns, which is millionths of a meter. To put that in perspective, a human hair is about 75 microns in diameter. The clearances in a fuel injector are often less than 5 microns. These systems require absolutely clean fuel because even microscopic particles can score precision surfaces, causing leaks and failures. When underground fuel tanks corrode, they shed rust particles into the fuel. Steel tanks rust from the inside as they're exposed to moisture and fuel, and from the outside as they sit in soil that may contain moisture and corrosive chemicals. When fuel lines degrade, they contribute scale and debris as protective coatings break down and metal corrodes. When concrete pads crack and shift, they can damage tank tops and piping connections, introducing contamination paths. This chain's stations have documented issues with corroded tank infrastructure, some dating back 30 or 40 years past their design life, but they continue operating rather than making costly repairs or replacements. A new underground fuel tank installation costs $50,000 to $100,000 per tank, and stations typically have multiple tanks. The fuel leaving their pumps contains particulate contamination that your fuel filter catches initially. Your fuel filter is designed to catch particles down to about 10 to 30 microns depending on the vehicle. It works fine for normal fuel with minimal contamination, but filters have limited capacity. Once the filter becomes saturated with debris, particles begin passing through into your fuel system because the filter media can't capture anymore. These particles act like sandpaper on fuel injector nozzles, scoring the precision-machined surfaces that control fuel spray. They damage fuel pump impellers and bearings, causing noise and eventual failure. They score pressure regulator valve seats, causing fuel pressure control problems. The damage is cumulative and irreversible. A fuel injector that's been scored by contaminated fuel will never seal properly again. The damaged sealing surfaces allow fuel to leak past, causing rich running conditions where the engine gets too much fuel. This leads to fouled spark plugs covered in carbon and fuel deposits, rough running, overheating, poor fuel economy, and eventually catalytic converter damage as unburned fuel enters the exhaust and overheats the catalyst. The high-pressure fuel pump, which costs $1,500 to $3,000 depending on your vehicle, can be destroyed by contaminated fuel in a matter of weeks. The pump relies on incredibly tight clearances to generate high pressure. Particles scoring these surfaces cause internal leakage, reducing pressure and eventually causing complete failure. I've pulled fuel filters from cars that filled up at these stations, and the filters were packed with rust particles and debris. The filter media was completely saturated, turned orange from rust, and in some cases partially collapsed from pressure buildup as fuel flow became restricted. In one extreme case, we drained the fuel tank from a customer's car and found nearly a quarter cup of sediment at the bottom, a mixture of rust, scale, and particulate contamination. That entire fuel system required replacement: tank, pump assembly, all fuel lines from tank to engine, fuel filter, all 4 or 6 fuel injectors, and the fuel pressure regulator. The total cost exceeded $12,000 for parts and labor. And getting the gas station to pay for it? Good luck with that. They'll claim the contamination came from your tank or some other source, even when you have receipts proving you filled there and analysis showing the contamination matches material from their tanks. Our 9th problematic chain has been expanding into urban areas, and they've developed a concerning pattern of short-changing customers on fuel quantity. Independent testing has found their pumps consistently delivering less fuel than what the meter shows. State weights and measures departments test fuel pumps periodically, and this chain has been cited repeatedly for pumps that deliver 5 to 10% less fuel than indicated. This is theft, plain and simple, but it also has implications for your engine's health beyond just costing you money. Modern engines have evaporative emission systems that are carefully calibrated for the fuel tank capacity. These systems capture fuel vapors from the tank and route them to a charcoal canister that stores them until the engine can burn them. The system uses sensors to monitor tank pressure and fuel level, calculating vapor space and controlling purge rates. When you consistently receive less fuel than you think you're getting, the fuel tank never actually fills to capacity. The computer thinks you have a full tank based on the gallons pumped, but the actual fuel level is lower. This causes the evaporative emission system to function improperly because fuel vapor space calculations are incorrect. The computer is operating based on false assumptions about tank volume and vapor space. Over time, this can damage the charcoal canister that captures fuel vapors. The canister becomes saturated because it's processing more vapors than expected based on the computer's calculations. A saturated charcoal canister can't capture more vapors, leading to check engine lights with evaporative emissions codes and failed emissions tests in areas that require them. Replacing a charcoal canister costs $300 to $800 depending on the vehicle. But there's a more direct problem: fuel starvation. If your gauge shows half a tank but you actually have significantly less fuel than that, you might run the fuel pump dry, especially on hills or during hard acceleration when fuel sloshes away from the pickup. Fuel pumps are cooled and lubricated by the gasoline they're submerged in. The electric motor that drives the pump generates heat, and gasoline flowing through the pump carries this heat away. When the pump runs dry, even momentarily, it overheats because there's no fuel to cool it. The pump motor windings can overheat and fail. The pump bearings and brushes wear, accelerated without fuel lubrication. This leads to premature pump failure. Running low on fuel also means the pump picks up sediment from the bottom of your tank, which concentrates there over time as particles settle by gravity. This sediment damages the pump's impeller and check valves and clogs the fuel filter prematurely. I've diagnosed numerous premature fuel pump failures in vehicles that frequented these stations. The owners thought they had plenty of fuel based on their gauge reading and the gallons they pumped, but they were actually running critically low due to being short-changed at the pump. A fuel pump replacement typically costs $600 to $1,500 depending on the vehicle and whether it's accessible through an access panel or requires dropping the entire fuel tank. Some cars require dropping the entire fuel tank to access the pump, which involves draining all the fuel, disconnecting fuel fuel lines and electrical connectors, supporting the exhaust system, removing the tank straps, and lowering the heavy tank carefully. This labor-intensive process adds several hours to the repair cost. Multiply that across thousands of customers being cheated on fuel quantity, and you can see how this chain's dishonest practices are costing drivers serious money in repairs beyond the theft of fuel itself. I want to pause here and ask you something important. Have you ever had unexplained fuel system problems that mechanics couldn't figure out? Sometimes it's not your car, it's the fuel you're putting in it. Share your experiences in the comments because other viewers need to hear these real-world examples. These stories help everyone make better decisions about where to fuel their vehicles. Chain number 10 operates in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic regions, and they've been repeatedly caught with contaminated premium fuel. Here's their scam. They're filling the premium tanks with mid-grade fuel and charging premium prices. This simple fraud costs customers money directly, but it gets worse than simple Octane fraud. In several documented cases, their premium tanks were found to contain gasoline contaminated with diesel fuel. This happens when delivery drivers pump diesel into gasoline tanks or vice versa, usually due to poor labeling, confusing tank layouts, or simple carelessness. Even small amounts of diesel and gasoline cause immediate and severe problems. Diesel fuel doesn't ignite properly in a gasoline engine because gasoline engines rely on spark ignition. The spark plug creates a high-voltage arc that ignites a precisely timed air-fuel mixture. Diesel fuel has a much higher flash point than gasoline, meaning it doesn't vaporize and ignite as easily. The spark plugs can't reliably ignite diesel fuel vapor the way they ignite gasoline vapor. When diesel-contaminated gasoline enters your engine, you'll experience severe misfires as cylinders fail to fire properly. The engine will run extremely rough, shaking and vibrating. You'll see black smoke from the exhaust as unburned diesel exits the engine. The check engine light will illuminate immediately with multiple misfire codes. The engine will likely go into limp mode, limiting power and speed to protect itself from damage. But the damage is already being done even in limp mode. Diesel fuel leaves heavy deposits on spark plugs, coating the electrodes with carbon and fuel residue that prevents proper spark formation. These spark plugs are ruined and must be replaced. The diesel fuel that doesn't burn in the cylinders gets pushed out into the exhaust system. It contaminates the catalytic converter, coating the precious metal catalyst surfaces with unburned fuel that bakes on at exhaust temperatures. This can permanently destroy the catalytic converter's ability to process emissions. A catalytic converter replacement costs $1,000 to $3,000 depending on the vehicle and whether it's a bolt-on unit or welded into the exhaust. The fuel injectors become coated with diesel residue that's extremely difficult to remove because diesel fuel contains heavier hydrocarbons that leave stubborn deposits. The injectors may need professional ultrasonic cleaning or replacement. If you continue driving on diesel-contaminated gasoline, attempting to reach a repair shop or make it home, you're compounding the damage with every mile. You're looking at replacing all spark plugs, possibly all ignition coils if they've been damaged by misfires, likely the catalytic converter, and cleaning or replacing fuel injectors. We're talking $3,000 to $5,000 in repairs minimum, and potentially much more if engine damage occurs from severe misfires. The reverse situation, gasoline in a diesel tank, is even worse for diesel vehicles. Gasoline lacks the lubricity that diesel fuel provides to lubricate injection pumps and injectors. It can cause complete fuel system failure, destroying the injection pump, all injectors, and potentially causing engine damage. This chain's contamination problems stem from improper tank labeling at their stations, poorly maintained tank sensors that don't alert when the wrong fuel is being delivered, and delivery drivers who aren't properly trained or supervised. It's shocking negligence that's destroying customer vehicles. If you filled up at one of these stations and your car suddenly starts running terribly, especially if you bought premium fuel, you need to stop driving immediately. Have the vehicle towed to a shop, explain that you suspect fuel contamination, and have the fuel tank drained and the system flushed before the contamination causes permanent damage. Time is critical because the longer contaminated fuel circulates through your system, the more components become damaged. Finally, our 11th chain to avoid operates nationally with hundreds of locations coast to coast, and their problem is systematic ethanol contamination above legal limits. Federal law requires gasoline to contain no more than 10% ethanol for most vehicles, designated as E10. Flex fuel vehicles can use E85, which contains 51 to 85% ethanol, but this must be clearly labeled at the pump and sold through dedicated pumps and tanks. This chain has been caught blending higher ethanol concentrations into regular gasoline without proper labeling, essentially creating E15 or E20 fuel that they're selling as E10. Some samples tested as high as 20% ethanol when the label indicated 10% maximum. Why is this a problem? Ethanol is corrosive to fuel system components not designed for it. It attacks certain rubbers, plastics, and metals used in fuel systems. It degrades rubber hoses, causing them to swell, soften, and eventually crack. It attacks cork and rubber gaskets, causing leaks. It corrodes certain zinc and aluminum alloys used in carburetors and fuel system components in older vehicles. In older vehicles not designed for any ethanol, high concentrations cause rapid deterioration of fuel lines, leading to leaks and potential fire hazards. But even in newer vehicles designed to handle E10, higher ethanol concentrations cause problems because the materials are only rated for 10% ethanol exposure. Ethanol contains significantly less energy per gallon than gasoline, about 33% less. So higher ethanol content means worse fuel economy. You're burning more fuel to travel the same distance. If you're getting E20 instead of E10, you're losing approximately 3 to 5% in fuel economy, which over time costs you significantly at the pump. You're paying for gasoline but getting diluted fuel with less power and range. Ethanol is hygroscopic, aggressively absorbing water from the atmosphere. Higher ethanol concentrations mean more water absorption capacity. As the fuel sits in your tank, the ethanol absorbs moisture from humid air that enters through the tank vents. Eventually, this leads to phase separation where water and ethanol separate from gasoline and sink to the bottom of your tank because the water-ethanol mixture is denser. This creates a layer of water and alcohol at the tank bottom with gasoline floating on top. When your fuel pump draws from the tank bottom, it sucks up this water-ethanol mixture. This causes the same problems we discussed earlier: corrosion, rough running, misfires, and potential hydrolock. Ethanol also runs leaner than gasoline, meaning it provides less fuel for the amount of air in the combustion chamber because it contains oxygen in its molecular structure. Engines calibrated for E10 that receive E20 will run lean, with too much air and not enough fuel. Lean operation causes elevated combustion temperatures because there's no excess fuel to cool the combustion process. This high heat can burn exhaust valves, causing them to warp and lose their seal with the valve seat. It can damage pistons, particularly the piston crowns that face the combustion chamber. It destroys catalytic converters as excessive heat causes the catalyst substrate to melt or break apart. The long-term cost of using this chain's improperly blended fuel includes accelerated wear on fuel system components as ethanol attacks materials, reduced engine life due to lean operation creating excessive heat, frequent fuel system repairs from corrosion and degradation, and potential complete fuel system replacement in severe cases. I've seen complete fuel system replacement jobs on vehicles that exclusively used this chain's fuel. The rubber fuel lines were cracked and brittle, seeping fuel at connection points. Fuel injector O-rings and seals were deteriorated, causing external fuel leaks. The fuel pump assembly showed extensive corrosion on metal parts and deteriorated rubber seals. The fuel pressure regulator diaphragm was damaged. The repair required replacing every rubber component in the fuel system, the fuel pump assembly, pressure regulator, and all fuel lines from tank to engine. The cost approached $10,000 for a complete fuel system restoration. Now that you know these 11 chains to avoid, let me give you some practical advice for protecting your vehicle. First, stick with top-tier fuel retailers. Top-tier gasoline is a designation created by major automakers including BMW, General Motors, Honda, and others. Top-tier retailers agree to add higher concentrations of detergent additives to their fuel than the minimum required by EPA regulations. These enhanced detergents keep engines cleaner, preventing deposit formation on intake valves and in combustion chambers. The list of top-tier retailers is publicly available and includes major brands that have proven fuel quality. Yes, you'll pay slightly more per gallon, typically 3 to 8 cents, but you'll save thousands in repair costs by preventing deposits and using quality fuel. Second, if you suspect you've gotten bad fuel, act immediately. The longer contaminated fuel stays in your system, the more damage it causes and the more components become affected. If your car starts running poorly immediately after filling up, that's not coincidence. Bad fuel causes immediate symptoms. Don't ignore them, hoping the problem will resolve itself as you burn through the tank. Have the vehicle towed to a shop, explain that you suspect bad fuel, and have the tank drained before driving further. Third, keep detailed fuel receipts. If you do experience fuel-related damage, documentation is crucial for any potential claim against the station. You'll need to prove you purchased fuel there, the date and time, the amount purchased, and ideally, the fuel grade. Take photos of your odometer reading and the pump receipt. This documentation may help you recover repair costs, though stations often deny responsibility. Fourth, trust your engine and pay attention to how it responds to different stations. If your car consistently runs poorly after filling at a particular location, stop using that station even if you can't identify the specific problem. Your engine is telling you something is wrong. Keep a fuel log noting where you fill up and how the car performs afterward. This helps identify problem stations before serious damage occurs. Fifth, maintain your fuel system proactively. Use quality fuel system cleaners periodically according to product directions. These cleaners can remove light deposits before they become serious problems. Replace fuel filters on schedule according to your vehicle manufacturer's recommendations. Many newer cars have lifetime fuel filters that supposedly never need replacement, but in reality they should be replaced every 60 to 80,000 miles in most conditions. Have your fuel injectors professionally cleaned if you notice performance issues, rough idle, or decreased fuel economy. Professional cleaning uses pressurized cleaning solutions and ultrasonic baths to remove deposits that over-the-counter cleaners can't touch. The bottom line is this: your engine is the heart of your vehicle, and fuel is its lifeblood. Contaminated, adulterated, or poor quality fuel destroys engines slowly and expensively. The 11 chains I've outlined today have documented histories of fuel quality problems. Some are cutting corners to maximize profit, some are committing outright fraud, some are simply negligent about maintenance and quality control. Whatever their reasons, the result is the same: damaged vehicles and costly repairs for unsuspecting customers. You work hard for your money, and your vehicle represents a significant investment, often second only to your home. Don't let a few cents savings per gallon cost you thousands in repairs. Choose your fuel source carefully based on reputation and quality, not just price. Pay attention to how your engine responds to different stations and trust what it's telling you. And if something seems wrong, investigate immediately before minor problems become major failures. Your engine will thank you with years of reliable service, smooth operation, and minimal repair costs. And your wallet will thank you when you avoid those catastrophic repair bills that can run into 5 figures for severe fuel-related damage.